advice do you have for new managers in supporting employees through changes in both their work and personal lives?
So new managers, I can take this question in a couple of different ways. It's as a new manager, if you're trying to support your employees, I found that it can be very challenging when you haven't walked in someone else's shoes. Like for instance, I remember early in my career when I had two kids at home, and I had a boss that just worked all crazy hours of the night. And I felt like I just had to be so respondent any single time with weekends, what have you. And he didn't have a family. He didn't have kids. And here he was as a leader. And I remember when he finally had a kid, I was like, yes, it's a light bulb is going to go off and realize how challenging it can be. So I think when managers are not able to have empathy, guess what? They need to start to seek to understand and maybe get some training. They may have blind spots in order to lead, because you have to realize when you're a manager, you have to lead a whole different spectrum of people, right? And people are in all different phases of life. So in a lot of ways, you have to listen, you have to understand, and you synthesize the data of your team of where they're at, and then that's how you lead. So I think it's always on an individual basis where a leader has to go in, ask the right questions, and you also gain trust in those relationships over time, where some people may tell you more things than others or feel comfortable, but those type of open, authentic conversations are earned over time. But you can't just be like, oh, tell me what's going on in your life and let me see if I can help you, right? Not everyone's going to open up that quickly, but you'll be fine if you maybe are vulnerable yourself. Hey, this is what I have going on at home. This is the change that's going on through my life. Not that we have to share all our stories, but I think when you're a little bit more authentic and being, sharing some personal stuff of like, hey, this is how I'm juggling stuff, and just putting yourself out there first, then guess what? People start, being themselves as well, and sharing their stories and sharing their needs. So the more that we create, we're more psychological safety of sharing those things. I think those are the better leaders. Those are the leaders actually that I personally want to work for, and the leader that I want to be. So I think I put myself in those shoes of how to lead better. And it's interesting. I have a nanny that helps me, and she's been helping me for many years. And she has a baby. I was like, hey, bring your baby to work right here in the house. And so I even have greater empathy that I now have this new little newborn, now crawling around the house and hearing the noises and everything. And we're all at home. It's like, I understand now, even though I did have a child, sometimes you forget when they're at a different age. And I'm like, wow, just seeing it is just such a great reminder of how hard it can be. So yeah, that would be my advice.
If you could wave a magic wand, what policies or changes to the workplace would you make that would make a difference for working moms or for anybody else?
If I could wave a magic wand, oh my goodness, I would have so much fun here. Let's see. First, I definitely would make sure that there was a consistent policy of time off. I think every company does it differently. So making sure that time is expanded, and it's for a large amount of time. I think that daycare, I'd love that if every company had their own daycare. I think it's number one, it can be expensive, but if they can offer that as a benefit, I think that'd be great. And I think there's also a sense of community that also can happen as parents, right? Where if your kids are going to the same potential daycare where you also work, and especially it depends if you're remote or if you're on site, being in close proximity would be amazing. I remember having my child far away from where I was going to work, and then something happening to them and not being able to be there in seconds or minutes, right? It's, as a parent, you want to be there as close as possible. So if you can have on-site daycare, that would be absolutely amazing. And also just makes you feel a little bit better. It's, as parents, we're always constantly worrying. And I remember the first day that I dropped my son and my daughter off to daycare, I was so nervous. Are they going to know how to do this? Or they be able to contact me? All these things. Can I be there in a second? They need calming, or they're going through something. It is so hard to be far away. So that would be definitely something. I would like to see. Another thing that I would like to see is, I don't think having leave is just something that you need when you have a child in the early stages. I think that there's something that goes through when your child is growing. I would love to have some of that time that I didn't actually take it now, and have that be a norm. I think when your children go, especially through the middle school years, they're going through massive change as into mini adulthood. And so if there was benefits to even take more of that time off, I think that would be great. And I think cost is a big factor. So I think any financial support for daycare. I remember in my early days, literally having a ledger. Okay, this is how much daycare is, because it's very expensive when they're younger. And you just adding up 2 kids in daycare, this is how much I make. And then you start looking at the numbers and you're like, wow, does this really make sense for me to work? And I remember at the time thinking, it may not all financially add up and make sense, but this is going to be an investment in my future, also my sanity, for something that I like to do as a person. And then it starts evening out in the long run. And it did. And I think that financial help is always a big thing to just make those choices a little bit easier. So I think there's a different, when a mother decides to take time off, there's also sometimes that gap in their profile, right, or their resume on LinkedIn, and their pay is a consequence of that. And you see that all in the data. So the more that we can also now look at that and look at that differently, there's also, they maybe took a pause, but it doesn't mean they're not any more capable than they were before. And so I think minimizing the pay gap would be another thing that we should also, companies should assess. Hey, how am I doing? How am I paying all my employees? Am I doing equal pay? And so truly looking at the numbers and making sure that there's no biases that are in there, because at the end of the day, these are managers that are deciding you get paid this, or you get paid that, or you get this raise, or that change in your salary. And as individuals, when you go back to managers, if they don't have the right training, or if they've never been maybe in somebody else's shoes or have empathy, those biases, they creep in, and it's hard to actually say, well, that's the reason why, but they do exist. So I think if maybe you're blind by it, but at least you look at the data and you're like, wow, I am maybe making some decisions different, or the company is actually making some different decisions based on where people are at. So I think equal pay is another thing, and then taking into consideration time off should not make a difference in that.
Wow, so much insight. I am so appreciative of that, and like all the time that you took. It was so great talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cindy.